Okay. So, how are you? I closed the door, just a second. Okay. So, how are you? Fine. Okay. I just wanted to tell you that I am continuously updating the file on interaction, and some of you updated autonomously it, and this is fine. One of you put a reference to a video. I still have to look at it, but with reference to the video with a comment, and this is fine. And also one of you told me that she is preparing a presentation on water systems, history of water systems, in particular I think related to history of Bologna water systems. This is perfect. If you have any idea, I will make you some proposals about presentations that you may deliver. If you have any idea, please feel free to contact me, and about the presentation that you may deliver to ourselves. And I will also give you some ideas related to the use of the software that we are starting today to learn. Anyway, the message is please be continuously open. We are keeping track of everything, and after a while we will start talking about also evaluation of what you're doing and opportunities for integrating these activities in your final assessment exam. Okay, so now let me start with this practical part of the course. Yesterday I suggested to you to install a software, and I would like to ask you if you had any problem in installing it. I told you just to install it, not to try to use it, or let me say, I didn't ask you, I didn't suggest you to open it, because we are supposed to do it together today. So if there are no problems, I would like to start by making a short premise on the software that I suggested. This software, R, it's called R, just with the capital letter R. It's open source. So first of all, why an open source platform? The reason is that, as I briefly mentioned yesterday, I think it is an essential part of your background to be able to use open source software. Why? Because open source software is software that is available for free. You don't need any commercial license to buy it. So there is a kind of philosophical motivation to justify the use of the open source software in the academia for education. And the philosophical motivation is that by using free software, by using free information, we promote education in the best way. Because, of course, we use tools that are accessible to everybody, provided they have access to the web. And therefore, with respect to international education, with respect to education with an international perspective, this is extremely important. What is the problem about the need of buying a license? And the problem is, first of all, an economic problem. There are softwares that are very cheap, commercial softwares that are very cheap, so the problem is it's a minor problem. But there are commercial softwares that are extremely expensive, especially those that are more specific to engineering. To give you an idea, MATLAB to the university, you know that we have a free license, no, we have a licensed campus, not free, and the university pays about 70,000 euros per year to buy it. I think this is unaffordable, and I am pushing the university towards leaving MATLAB and adopting an open source replacement. There are several emulators, because I think that it is indeed a huge expense. If you think about providing scholarships in states, we could provide 70 scholarships to students, 1,000 euros each, which is not negligible. So, it is an economic problem for some software. There are software that costs much more than MATLAB. And second, it is a bit risky because, of course, when a software is expensive, some people are tempted to crack it, let me use this word. And cracking a software is something that I highly discourage you to do, because in the past it was like a very widespread habit, but today it is extremely risky, because with the diffusion of the web and the connections, you are always identifiable. And I strongly suggest you not to do that, because we had some problems with students in the recent past, and when fines come, they are not negligible fines, like 100,000 euros to pay, and you understand that for a student it's a bit of a problem. Also for a professor it's a bit of a problem. And also for the university it's a bit of a problem. So I strongly discourage you to do that. And because, as I said, there are now several means available to commercial producers for tracking the use of softwares, and you may not suspect it, but indeed it is, they are extremely powerful, and you are always identifiable, because you typically use your PC, your phone, and therefore everybody is identifiable today. So this is a kind of risk that I want to avoid to students, because for instance for MATLAB what typically happens is that students use MATLAB in the campus with the license, but then at home they don't have the license. The license is quite expensive, and therefore students are tempted to crack it, which is easy, I mean. And they don't mind if it is easy, because of course, you know, they also can get money. It's not the case of MATLAB, but for other softwares they can get money by finding people that are cracking the software. So beware of the risk. Also, beware of the risk when you get material from the web. This is something that incidentally I want to tell you. So when you get pictures, like for putting pictures in your thesis, or and you get sentences from the web, cutting and pasting, it is extremely risky in some cases. And especially for pictures, it's risky, but also when cutting and pasting. And keep in mind that cutting and pasting, and let me say in a more technical way, plagiarism is I don't know how to say in English. We say in Italian it's a reato penale, which means that you can go to jail if you make plagiarism. And same way, we had problems, significant problems in the recent past with the students that cut and pasted material from the web on the thesis, in the final year project. And you know, it's a very, very nasty problem, because there is a kind of penal. Basically, they note on your records, of crimes, that you did this, and this is implying several consequences. So beware of the risk when you take material from the web. If you look at my web pages, you see that pictures are always taken from Wikipedia Commons, because they are in the public domain. I always make sure that everything is in the public domain. Sometimes I cut and paste short sentences. If the sentence is short, it's not a problem. If it becomes longer and longer, it is a problem. So when I cut and paste, I always make sure that it is a very short sentence, and I try to change the wording, because it's indeed risky. And sometimes we are not aware of the risk, and we think that it's a risk that it's not related to us, to our activity. We are in a good faith, but still, it's a risk. So, the motivation for using an open source software is that it's cheap, it's for free, it's not risky, and there is another motivation. The motivation is related to the support that you get. getting support from a commercial software is more difficult with respect to an open source. When you get an error from your PC related to an open source software, if you cut and paste the error, in this case you can do it in Google, you find always the reply to your problem. You always find support from people. Getting support from a commercial producer, it's much, much more difficult. Sometimes they want to be paid, and therefore it's another very good motivation for adopting an open source. There is, of course, a downside. The open source software generally is less user-friendly. And the motivation is very simple. The software is developed by people for free. They are just passionate of contributing to it. And therefore, they are not paid, and therefore, of course, they try to limit their time commitment. And the open source software is addressed to experienced users. Experienced users usually don't need a user-friendly platform. They are experienced, they appreciate the fact that the software is not user-friendly, because if it is not, it means that it's more flexible. It means that it adds more power to you, because you can customize it, you can expand it, you can integrate it, and in order to do that, the software cannot be user-friendly. It must be at a more, let's say, it's a more earlier stage of the development. And this is a very good reason for introducing the open source software to you, to students, because it requires a time commitment that is greater with respect to a commercial software. So if you start during your profession, typically you don't have the time to do that. If you start when you are a student and you learn how to interact with an open source software, the logic is the same for all of them, and you basically earn a new skill. The ability, you learn a new skill, the ability to use open source platforms and softwares. This is something that, in my opinion, needs to be got at the student stage. And this is why another motivation for using an open source software. One more thing before I start. Let's talk about the operating system of your PC, which is in 95% of the cases Windows, in 4% of the cases it's Mac, maybe some more than 4% nowadays, and it's about 100% of the cases is an open source operating system, like Linux, Ubuntu, Fedora, Red Hat, whatever. The difference is very simple in this case as well. If you use Windows, it's a closed system. If you use an open source operating system, it's open. And it's available for free. In this case, the price is not really something that concerns you, because buying Windows is about 70 euros, not more, Windows plus Office. And therefore, you may be, you don't strictly need to learn how to use a free operating system like Linux, Ubuntu. But the same reasoning applies. I highly suggest you to learn how to use these two options. Why I say two options? Because Mac is based on Linux. It's closed, it's commercial, but it's based on Linux. Once that you learn how to use Linux, then you already learned how to use Mac. So the two options are Windows and Linux. There are other options, but the two options that I suggest you to learn are these two. There are disadvantages in using Linux because it's less user-friendly. I am using Linux, and my operating system is, in this case, is a version of Ubuntu. You can recognize that, of course, my taskbar is different with respect to Windows. And as I said, it's, in general, it's less user-friendly. Today, you don't notice it very much because they look very similar. There are some compatibility problems. For instance, I use Office, Microsoft Office within the Linux operating system. There are some compatibility problems, which is a downside. And I recognize that Office, Microsoft Office, is still the best Office suite that one can use. Other free alternatives are not as efficient as Microsoft Office is. I'm also using LibreOffice, but there is some compatibility problem, and still, I think that Microsoft Office is still better. On the other hand, if you resolve these compatibility problems, there are several advantages. I just tell you some of them. First, same reasoning, the system is open, and you gain a new skill. You can put in your CV that you can work in Windows and Linux, and I tell you this is appreciated. Second, you are almost virus-free. I started using Linux in 2008, and the reason why I started is that I was completely fed up by viruses, because my PC is always connected to the web with a static IP. Static IP means that the channel from the internet to my PC is always the same, the root, and therefore, of course, I can get fun in hacking, got fun in hacking my PC. I was hacked several times, and I was completely fed up, and therefore I passed to Windows. It's 10 years today, these days, and I never got a problem with Linux about viruses, and also I never used an antivirus besides the default one. Which means that the computer is faster, the computer is less loaded, and therefore the hard disk lasts more, and also the motherboard lasts more. My technical problems reduced drastically, and I can easily use a computer that I had 10 years ago, still perfectly working, because the system does not demand much resources to the PC. Furthermore, there is another issue that I want to mention to you. Windows, after a couple of years, if you use it intensively, gets very slow. The reason is that any operating system gets deteriorated with time. It means that the size of some files continues to increase, and therefore the load on the PC increases with time. You get at a certain point that you are forced to reinstall the operating system, reinstall Windows, because the computer doesn't work anymore. In the past, I thought that was a problem of the PC that was getting older. Instead, it was just a problem of the operating system. And I learned that Windows deteriorates much more rapidly with respect to Linux, and the reason is commercial. After a couple of years, if you are forced to reinstall the operating system, you probably decide to change the PC. Because, it doesn't worth the effort reinstalling the operating system on an old PC. And also reinstalling Windows takes a lot of time. Linux deteriorates with a speed that you don't notice it. Probably it gets at the same level that Windows gets to after 2 years. Linux takes like 20 years, and therefore you don't notice it. And this was another reason why I decided I was really fed up by reinstalling Windows. My computer is always turned on. You see my website, it's on my PC, my personal PC in the office. It's always turned on, and after 1 year, 1 year and a half, I was forced to reinstall everything, and it was completely fed up. So, the message is, be open to open source software. Always wonder whether there is an open source alternative. MATLAB, is there an open source alternative? Answer, yes, and I think it's perfectly efficient. People don't use it, they refuse to use it because they believe that it's not as efficient and there are compatibility problems. It is partially true, but they can be solved very quickly. Be open to open source operating system because it makes your life easier. And again, I say one more time, keep in mind that your profession will be made by repeated tasks to perform every day. Like sending an email. Sending an email is something that we do like 100 times a day. Maybe that you are still in a phase where you send less of them, but usually a professional sends 100 emails a day. when you open an email, if it takes 1 second to open or 10 seconds more to open, you can easily count at the end of the day how much time you saved if you used an efficient mailer. Same thing for all the tasks that you do. If you use MATLAB or you use R, you will see that there are some tasks that in R makes with a faster speed, with a higher speed, and you save time. And these are all essential elements for succeeding in the career. Keep in mind that to succeed in the career, you don't need an exploit. Very often you need the sum of several small things that you put all together, and this makes you unique. It's difficult to reach an exploit. I was never able to do that, but it's much easier to achieve and to put together some very small steps. Okay. First thing, I am using, let's start it. I am using a different operating system with respect to you, so the look is different. So, if you use Windows, you just have to double click the icon that the program created. Did everybody install R already? Or raise your hand if you did not. Just one? Okay. In order to install it, do you have the PC here? No. Okay. So you can just follow today, okay? Perfect. Okay. If you installed it and you use Windows, please double click on it. And I'm starting now my R on my PC. In Linux, in Mac, I don't know, I think you have an icon. Does somebody use Mac here? Okay, you, perfect. Just one. The other one are all Windows. Okay, good. By the way, if you want to try Linux, it is very simple. Get an old PC and install this program here. Just 1 second. If you Google for Lubuntu, you get to this page. Download 64-bit or 32. And this is a Linux operating system. It is the lighter, meaning that it runs over every PC with minimal requirements. If your PC is younger than 10 years, you are fine. So if you have an old PC that you don't use anymore because it doesn't load the Windows anymore because you have Windows 10 maybe or Windows 8 and it doesn't work on an old PC, just get the old PC from your shelf and install this. There is a CD that you can just write and install the operating system, and you can try Linux. Okay, this is the easiest way. There are more complicated ways, like to have 2 operating systems on the same PC, but this is a bit more complicated. It is possible. You need a partition of the hard disk, and you need 2 operating systems running in alternative, not together. Okay, let's forget about Linux for now, and let me start my R. In Linux, I just need to type R and it starts. So let me use a font that allows you to read. Just 1 second. Let's try with 20. 28, maybe it's too much. Yeah, this is too much. Just 1 second. Okay, so if you start it in Windows, it should open a white window with the same writing there, but your window has menus on the top. Okay, but what you should see in any way is both in Windows and in any operating system, this major sign with a black rectangle, meaning that R is waiting for your input from the keyboard. You should get here. R is like MATLAB, a software that needs an interaction with the user through the keyboard, through commands. So it's not a software like Excel where you could interact with the mouse. The use of the mouse in R is very limited. You have some menus, so in your case you can use also the mouse to interact with the program. In my case I don't have any menu, and therefore the interaction is through commands like MATLAB. There is an interface that has been built to interact with R, which is called RStudio. You already have a guide on my website, a short introduction to R and RStudio. It's a presentation in PDF where you can learn the basics of R, and also you can learn about RStudio. RStudio is an interface, which means that instead of opening only one window, it opens 3 or 4 windows, depending on the settings that you choose. And through the interface, you can better interact with the program. But the interface doesn't give you any more opportunity in terms of computations, in terms of software use. It's just a facilitator of your interaction, the interface. So I'm not used to use that interface, and the reason is that with 4 windows, for me it's much easier to work without it, but this is your choice. To the students, my suggestion is try to use the interface. You need to download it by following the instructions that are reported in my guide. You need to install it and try to get familiar. It is something that is useful to know. For now, I start without the interface because the basics, I think, are better learned by working directly on the console. This window here, namely the window that waits for your input, is called the console. Or this line, not more, and this line here with the black rectangle, which means, which is called the cursor, which means that the computer is waiting for your input on this line. It's called the command line. So the command line is included in the console. The command line, it's a master opportunity to interact with the PC. Today we are used to interact with the PC through Windows, through the windows of Windows, and through the mouse. So we lost the opportunity to directly interact with the machine. Basically, we interact through Windows, through the mouse, through menus. There is no direct interaction. The direct interaction is much more powerful because you dialogue directly with the machine, not really directly because there is always an operating system in between. But in this case, the operating system, the filter operated by the operating system, is not as strong as in Windows. So you have the opportunity to give commands directly by writing. This is the reason why open source operating systems like Linux, they always have the console and the command line available for you. Windows used to have it, but then they dropped it because it was not needed anymore. Because Windows users typically, they don't have the need. They are not evolved enough to directly interact with the PC. Once that the user gets evolved, typically she refuses Windows because it's a too strong filter. Okay, so this is the command line. So let's focus on the console and the command line. Sorry if it is in Italian, but basically the commands that we can write here, they are language independent, they are in English, so just forget about these sentences here. And if you want to clear the screen, you can push Ctrl L. Control plus L, which means that you keep pressed Control and then you press L and we clear the screen. Okay, so what are the commands that can be given to the PC? This is the first step of your learning. Of course, once that you learn a new software, a software that is governed, is used through commands, the first thing that you know is to learn the commands. And this means learning a language. So when we ask to our colleagues, can you program in Fortran? Can you program in C? Basically the meaning is, do you know the commands of Fortran and the commands of C? Or some people use Python today, or PHP. The only thing that you need is to learn the commands. Keep in mind that the underlying logic, it is the same. When we talk about interacting with the PC, the underlying logic is always the same. It's different with respect to learning languages. In languages you have different grammars and different words. In this case you have just different words, but the logic, the grammar behind, it's the same. So once that you learn a language, and if you already learn a language because you're using MATLAB, you will see that the logic is the same. Okay. There is a striking difference between R, MATLAB, and Excel. Excel, as I said yesterday, you see what you are doing because you see the results of your operation in cells here. You don't see what you are doing unless, as we will see, we type a command like show me what I need, show me the variable q. I type this command and the computer displays the variable q. In Excel, once I inserted the variable q, it is visible. So there is a difference in that. Let's start with a very simple command. If I type 2 and I press return, the computer replies with 2. If I say 2 plus 2, it replies with 4. So the 4 operations, you can do that very easily. And if you want to divide, you have to use the fraction sign. If you want to multiply, you have to use the asterisk. And you can perform several different operations. 2 plus 3 minus 1 divided by 2. Pay attention to the priority of operations. Okay, so multiplication and division, they have the priority with respect to addition and subtraction. So in this case, the result is different if I put parentheses to change the priority. In this case, it computed 2 times 3, it's 6, minus 1, it's 5, divided by 2 is 2.5. Okay, and then there is the power. The power is computed by using the hat. The power can be also fractional. So the 4 operation, this is fine. Okay, now let me the 4 operation, but also let me clear the screen. The program has several functions embedded. Let me give you a very simple example. Square root, the word for square root is sqrt. Now, this is the first step, learning the functions. For the 4 operations, you don't have to learn anything. If you want to use the functions, you have to learn what are the functions that are embedded in R by default. And there are, of course, millions of them. The first solution to learn the function is, if you already know the name of the function and you want to know how to use it, is to use the help. So you may do like this, help sqrt. And you see that there is a description, an extended description, and also you see that besides sqrt, Also it describes ABS, which is absolute value. So several functions are described in the same page. This is fine. And if you scroll down, it explains to you how to use it. You see, I used it in this way, SQRT of 4. And the argument of the function is between round parentheses. And also there are, if you scroll down, there are other informations. I suggest you, when you call the help of this program, not to study it in detail, just learn the things that you need. There are two possible options for learning a software. There is, let's say, a top-down approach, which is you take a huge guide of the software, you learn everything, and then, or you try to learn everything, and then you apply. This is the top-down approach. It takes a lot of time. It gives you a more comprehensive knowledge. I would like to use the other way around, the bottom-up. Let's start from a problem, like I have to compute the square root of a number. What is the name of the function? I already know it, SQRT. Let me see how to use it. So I would suggest to stop here, usage, SQRT of x. Okay, that's fine. And if I look down, I see details. These are internal generic primitive functions. Forget about it. It means that it's already at a higher level of learning. We already know how to use the function. Let's forget about these details. Okay? In some cases, you may need them. But my suggestion is, let's start from the technical problem, in this case computing the square root, and then let's learn how to solve it. This is a minimal approach, and of course if you want to expand your knowledge later, that's fine. If you don't know what is the name of the function, first of all let me say, a quicker option to get to the help. Question mark SQRT. And also how to exit from the help, you press Q and you go back to the console.